Hi, I'm Melissa Cobb. Today we're going to be talking about the latest in the Trevor Jacob case.
AOPA keeps flying safe, accessible, and fun by protecting your freedom to fly. We are the most trusted one-stop resource for all things related to general aviation. Become an AOPA pilot today.
So Trevor is a former Olympic snowboarder. He's a YouTube sensation, and for general aviation pilots' interest, he's the one who bailed out of his Taylorcraft and did it all on video, hiked to the wreckage on video. He did this in November 2021. Well, shortly thereafter, a federal investigation opened. Then in April 2022, the FAA revoked his pilot certificates. Well, just last week, a plea agreement was announced between Trevor and the prosecutors, and basically he agreed to jumping out of and letting his aircraft crash for fame and money. There was a video sponsorship involved, and then subsequently to moving the aircraft and cutting it apart, destroying it, and disposing of it in different areas. And so we have Ryan King joining us today, and he's going to give us more context into this case and share lessons that we can all learn from it. Ryan actually has a criminal law background, and so it makes him perfect to put this all into context for us. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. To give some context, Trevor hasn't officially pled guilty yet. He has signed a plea agreement, so he agreed to plead guilty. That hearing has been scheduled. We don't know when exactly that's scheduled for. That's where he has to go before a judge, allocute to the crime, and actually plead guilty on the record. He agreed to plead guilty to violating 18 United States Code Section 1519, which is destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in a federal investigation. Specifically, the federal investigation in question were the ones being conducted by the NTSB and FAA. It is noteworthy that this agreement came before the grand jury. Matter of fact, Trevor gave his right to indictment by a grand jury to plead guilty to this sole charge. So he waived that right. Usually a grand jury has to be convened. The U.S. Attorney's Office has to present those charges to the grand jury, and then if they determine there's probable cause, they formally charge him or indict him with an information. The United States Attorney's Office, just came up with an agreement where he agreed to plead guilty to this, and in exchange he's getting some leniency. Specifically, what he's agreeing to say he did is that he knowingly altered, destroyed, concealed, or falsified a tangible object, i.e. the aircraft, and he did so acting with the intent to impede, obstruct, or influence an actual or contemplated investigation of a matter within the jurisdiction of the FAA and the NTSB.
Can you put the gravity of all that into context for us?
Yeah, this is a very serious offense. The federal government tends to operate on the basis of honesty from its citizenry and requires us to be forthcoming and honest. And if something that you say may incriminate you, you always have the right to remain silent pursuant to your Fifth Amendment right. And so the better course of action is just not make any statement at all, because lying to federal law enforcement only digs you into a deeper hole. And in this case, going as far as destroying evidence and lying to the investigator saying he didn't know where it was when he actually did, just made the matter even that much worse than what it could have been.
Obviously, anyone watching on YouTube knew where the aircraft was because he had hiked to it, and then later had a helicopter bring it out, and then he trailered it, back to the airport to take it apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that definitely is aggravating in terms of weighing out aggravating and mitigating evidence to determine what his sentence will be.
And speaking of that, what were the conditions of this plea agreement? What prison time could he face, or what kind of fines could he face?
Yeah, so the maximum punishment for this crime is 20 years imprisonment and a potential fine of up to $250,000. Based off of the plea agreement that he signed, I should back up and state that It's kind of dependent upon the judge. Federal sentencing is very judge oriented. They have a lot of discretion. However, a couple factors that will be taken into consideration is his mitigating evidence presented at the sentencing hearing, as well as the offense level the court assigns to this particular offense. The U.S. Attorney's Office agreed to recommend the low end of the applicable sentencing guideline range. He could be facing anywhere from 18 months to 51 months in prison. And that's assuming that he's not eligible for like probation or supervisory release.
There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from this. One is generally we don't need to be doing stunts. We need to be flying safely, using good judgment, combating those hazardous attitudes if we get a wild idea, because it could jeopardize the pilot's safety, the aircraft, safety of people or property, on the ground. And so, there are a lot of those safety aspects, but from a legal standpoint, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn as well. And one of those involves our responsibility as pilots and aircraft operators. If we do happen to be in an accident, our reporting requirements and preserving the wreckage. Can you kind of remind all of us about those requirements?
Absolutely. 49 Code of Federal Regulation Part 830 requires us to report aircraft accidents and other serious incidents to the NTSB, who will in turn notify the FAA. This report must be given within 10 days after the accident or serious incident. Further, you're not to touch anything or move anything or destroy anything until you are authorized to do so by the NTSB. If this involves like a gear up landing or a prop strike scenario and the NTSB determines it's not an accident and they release the wreckage back to you, then it's yours to do with as you please. If it's a little more serious, like in this set of circumstances where the aircraft crashed and presumably was totaled, but we don't know because we didn't see it before it was removed, helicoptered, and airlifted out and then destroyed. But we presume that given that it was abandoned in flight, it was probably totaled. The NTSB likely would have impounded it for their investigation and examine the wreckage to determine what happened and then proceed to create a report based off of that investigation.
And what are some other lessons that we can all take away from this?
Well, in addition to the lessons already stated, do not lie to investigators. That just gets you into that much more trouble. You always have the right to remain silent. So that is, if you think anything you're going to say or anything that you might say will incriminate you, whether it be from an administrative perspective or whether or not it's criminal liability, always have the right to remain silent. And so remain silent and seek legal advice as soon as possible prior to providing a statement. That is probably the best lesson that could be learned here. And certainly don't destroy evidence and dig yourself into a deeper hole than you may already be in.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you providing all the context and background, explaining the plea deal a little bit more for us.
Yeah, absolutely.